Hello, and welcome to the Creative Academy, the Blue Pencil section. This is where we take a look at the first 3 pages of your manuscript and offer you some notes and feedback. Now, we don't always agree, but we definitely have opinions. So I am Eileen Cook, and I am here today with both Crystal and Donna. And we are having the opportunity to take another peek at Elissa's pages. So this is a series of scenes that come in sort of the midpoint of the novel. So for those of you who have read some of her other pages, we are back in time, and the sisters have been basically captured. They've been taken onto a ship, and they're headed off to Athens, where they're going to be sold into slavery. Our main character, Sagaris, her ribs were previously broken after she tried to basically escape once before. So the scenes open when she is here on the ship. So I'm going to take us in, and I guess my first question that I'm actually going to throw out there is there's a couple of very short little sections here, and I'm not sure, Elissa, if we are getting the full section or if these are just like little excerpts that you took from a couple of different scenes. Because I think, at least for myself, and I'll open this to others, it felt a lot choppier than the other pieces we've gotten from you, where we were kind of in one scene for a much longer period. These are kind of almost, it's almost a montage, like if it was a film where we would sort of see these kind of very short little scenes. So I wasn't sure if that was your intention or if you were just kind of, nipping and giving us little pieces.
I, well, I was gonna maybe that might have occurred to me in back of mind, but because the scene starts with her kind of going in and out of consciousness, I actually just read these little snippets as, well, now she's out again, and now she's back. Oh, and now she's out again, and now she's back. So that did not jump out to me.
How about you, Crystal? Were the short scenes working for you or not working?
I did feel like we were hopping around a fair bit more. And one of the things I thought was a real strength of some of the other scenes we've read was that we really do drop right into it, and we're kind of experiencing it alongside the characters. Whereas this one, I felt a little bit hopping, and I wasn't sure how much time was going by necessarily in each of those gaps, like how quickly was this going on. So yeah, it did feel like the transitions were a little bit a little bit too abrupt, I think, or just that the sections either weren't long enough or whatever. But yes, there was a little bit of an issue about dropping into the flow and staying there that came up.
And I will agree that for all the previous scenes that we've read, I have connected emotionally with Sagaris or with the sister. And this particular set of scenes I didn't connect with in the same way, although it didn't leave me feeling like it was wrong. It just felt like, well, I'm not as in. Actually, it's true. I didn't care as much about what was going on. That is the truth. Yeah.
So I guess that's going to be a real question, because I think your point, Donna, was useful in terms of author choice. Like, do you want to create a sense where it is very disorienting? So the character feels disoriented, so you want the reader to be a bit disoriented. So that may be some of what you're trying to accomplish. But I think what's definitely coming up is you've just done such a great job about setting emotional tone in those other scenes, that in this one there is a little bit less. Although I did feel for her with this vomiting with the ribs, like there are some really great descriptors in here around, the boats moving, and then, that's making her sick, and having
mutinous body. I loved that line.
Yeah. Having, myself had, I had once time abdominal surgery and then was sick afterwards. And so like that was just horrific. And I still can remember how awful that was. I also loved mutinous body. That was also lovely.
Yeah. There were a few phrases that I highlighted. One of my favorites was the days turned to nights and the nights turned to days, and she grew weaker and weaker. And it just has this like cyclical time passing, but you can almost, like, the waves in the language are sort of mimicking the waves in the ocean, which I really liked, the way that rolling, like you can just feel that right along with the character. So there were a few things like that were really like vividly done. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There was one part where Sagaris has like a little bit of almost flashback. So she'd broken a bone before, and so she's thinking back on that. So she had basically, her sister rode over her with a horse, which sounds like something Zarina would do. And her dad sort of heals or basically sets that bone for her. While I liked that we were getting another bit of her sister and her and that sort of conflict, overall, I felt like that had been established. So I wasn't sure that you needed this flashback. I wasn't sure that it added anything to that scene um, that helped us deal with it in the present time for where she is. I'm not sure about you guys.
I had highlighted that same paragraph with a note that just like I get that it exists and it's useful information to know, but why does it go right here? Because if it was in the moment that her ribs were being broken and she was flashing back to the cracking of this other bone, like that is a tie that totally makes sense to me in terms of sensory triggers, or like why has she gone back there? Is it because the pain is so bad that she can't manage it and she's wishing she had some of those herbs her dad had convinced her to take? Like there's not a clear excuse me, there's not a clear rationale for why this is gonna add to this particular scene. If anything, it's just highlighting how tough she is in the past, which sort of, I don't know, almost feels minimizing in this case. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's always important, and I brought this up to people before, whenever you do a flashback, what you're essentially doing is you're putting your story in reverse. So you and the reader are driving along, or in this case, floating along on your boat, and then you're saying, I'm going to take you back. We're going to go all the way back, and we're going to look at something else before we go forward again. And so not that that's a bad thing to do. There's a lot of benefits sometimes to backing up and taking a look at something. But I always have people ask themselves, what's the benefit of backing up right here, right now? What do we learn? What is added? And I think there's some great material there, but I feel like we've had those things before where she and her sister are at odds, and she did have a really loving relationship with her parents, and she is tough as heck. Like, I feel like we have really established those things. So in this case, to me, it just felt like we backed up and I wasn't sure what I was supposed to notice. And then we go forward again.
Well, I'm not going to argue with you, but I am going to say I actually really loved the dialogue with the dad in the flashback, around the dad saying, I'm giving you these painkiller herbs for my sake, not for your sake, which, imagining that you're in this situation where you actually can't bear the pain and you don't have access to herbs, in my mind, I was thinking, okay, she's just trying to draw on a place where someone else has said, you can do this. I know you've got the strength. So I actually really like that piece of it. And I totally agree that the whole description of her arm breaking kind of took me away, but that part was valuable to me.
Then even I think having that transitional line, something like, she thought back to a time, she didn't feel like she could stand it. She thought back to a time where her dad knew that she could. And then the flashback, even something in that, I think would tie it together.
Well, in the next little bit, we're talking about she's never had this much time to think before and she didn't like it. And so maybe if she's thinking about the time that she had broken her arm in the past and she's reflecting on her father and that interaction, and and if her sister is very distressed and wishing she could help her in some fashion, and so she's teaching her language then to distract her, like, I think you have all the pieces, but they're not connected in a logical progression, at least externally. I'm sure you know exactly why all those pieces are right where they are, but sometimes as the writer we know exactly what's going on and we don't externalize it clearly enough, or in detail enough. So I think those things, if they were strung together as one piece, and you had the connecting pieces fleshed out a little bit more, there's a little bit more of the logic of that psychological progression of kind of her journey as being this active warrior who's trapped on this ship and physically incapacitated, and she's depending on people to help her, which she is not good at, was what we know from before. So this will be driving her crazy, and she'd be cranky as a bear. Her sister is probably about ready to kill her. It's so playing up that and making these things that are happening as coping mechanisms, like, you need to learn something and you'd be distracted and whatever. So just playing up that a little bit, I think, would give it a lot more sort of punch from a psychological point of view.
Because I think there is a lot of good stuff that's happening. I like that her sister's teaching her this language. One, because I'm suspecting that's going to be important in the next part of the story, that she knows some basic Greek. And it's also her having to rely on her sister, which she has not had to do in the past. It is her sister distract. So I feel like you're getting in that section a lot of kind of bang for your buck. So I think, as Crystal's saying, kind of pulling those together will help.
Yeah. And just a question, which is just outside of that scope, is I don't know enough about their society, but it would have been fairly unusual for them to do a lot of book learning in that particular culture, I would have imagined. So I was really curious where she had learned this language from. Is it travelers who were passing through? Like, where did her sister get this information from? Was something that did sort of get brought up for me, because when I picture the type of society that I've at least seen in the other pieces of this, they're often oral traditions. There's not generally a lot of book learning necessarily happening if you're dealing with people living in a small village and a lot of focus on battle, etc. So that would just be something that I'd be curious to know about, was where she came by that.
And then as we head into sort of the last section, the two sisters are sort of talking. And what you would see for me is there are a few places where I really wanted to see some of that interaction. So the sister is saying things like, I think you feel vulnerable. She's actually identifying you've always been in charge of your body and you're not. And Sagara says back, like, I'm not afraid. Like, that was a place where I wrote, I would love to see that. Like, is she trying to like pull herself more straight in her chair? Is she, because I want to see that because she is afraid, right? Like, that's exactly what's going on. And I liked that contrast. So I almost wanted a little bit more, because there's a wonderful line later where she says, Sagaris was not going to admit to being afraid. She may have lost control of her body, but she still had control of her tongue.
I loved that line.
Mm-hmm.
I did too. I wrote, great line.
Yeah, me
highlighted
too.
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that worked really particularly very well. And then for me, there was just a little bit then of what almost became borderline info dump. So the sister is telling us a lot of things about how they can get back, how, how far they're going to be from home, from Athens, all those kinds of things. I think you almost get away with it because it's really interesting stuff and you do good dialogue. So you have, I would say, the possibility for a pass. If you're ever going to do info dump, this would be the way to do it. So make it interesting, make me want to sort of find that along. But just to be aware, I think it is almost borderline into that.
Yeah. And the other thing that came up with that is that I think you have a brilliant setup for conflict and worry for Sagaris, because she's just come across on this boat and been crazy violently ill. And it's been this horrendous experience. The last thing she's going to want to do is get on another boat to come home that same way. But in her sister telling us right up front that, oh, don't worry, there's another way to go around, you remove all the opportunity for her to stew about that and get really worried. And, she is terrified, but if she's terrified that she's going to have to go back that same direction, but she's trying to be tough, then you have this really nice internal struggle of, she's going to do what needs doing to save her sister and herself, but she's going to be miserable the whole time. And, I think a lot of that tension and a lot of that potential for that stress level to be boosted up through the roof is removed by telling us right away there's another way. Let us find out in good time when it's time for them to take that other way. And then you have this massive relief that she's going to feel about not having to go back on that boat. But that's a lost opportunity if you tell us now.
Or you have to take it away from her. Like, so tell her like, whew, I'm not going to have to go on the boat. And so she's relieved, but then it becomes like, oh, but there's a whole reason why that's going to be shit-tacular in a completely different way. So you can, sort of sometimes make people feel a little bit better, but then, and not in real life, just in case, put that in brackets, but in fiction, then, make them feel a little bit better and then yank that away from them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But otherwise, Donna, go ahead.
No, I was just going to point out that the very last line again, it helped wrap this up for me in time. Like now Sagaris is actually speaking, so we know she must have recovered a little bit. We know that there's been some passage of time, but I actually laughed out loud with the very last line. Zarina says, "Father will never believe me when I tell him that you slept more than me on this journey." Now, two things happened for me. It was like Zarina is confident that they're going to get home and see their dad again, which is a little like maybe it doesn't feel like it's is in keeping with the Zarina that Sagaris knows, who is weak and so on. So she's being positioned as being strong and confident, and she's going to have a plan to get us home. So that was good. And then Sagaris says, "Yes, he will. He knows how tiring I find your presence, and sleep is my only escape." So again, I laughed out loud because it's a beautiful way that you're summing up their relationship again. Sagaris is still going to be the one who's the bossy older sister who's mean to her little sister, even when her little sister is the one who's got it together. And she's almost excusing the fact that she needs to sleep, that she's weak right now. Sleep is my only way to get away from you. Anyway, I just loved that wrap up, so I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I'm still just totally in love with this sister relationship, so that's a huge thing for me. Yeah. So I would say keep on keeping on, because I'm definitely still interested in this journey, and I want to know what happens to them once they get to Athens.
Mm-hmm.
So on behalf of all of us at the Creative Academy, thank you so much, Elissa, for turning in these pages. We appreciate it. And for anyone else, if you have some pages you'd like us to look at, make sure you submit them to the blue pencil section, and we'll see you then right here. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.